Okay, in this chapter, we'll continue to focus on middle childhood years, and we'll shift our focus to emotional and social developmental issues. So as you've discovered, we begin our conversations with Erikson again. Remember, he is the psychosocial developmental theorist that talks about a crisis that everyone faces at different stages of life. So again, in the middle childhood years, it's approximately age 6 to 12. And the crisis here is industry versus inferiority. And industry, if you think about just industry as itself, working, doing things, it's really about the child feeling successful at being able to complete tasks. Versus inferiority, then they'll have a sense of feeling less than others. So it's kind of connected a little bit to self-efficacy for tasks that they need to complete during these years. And some of that's going to certainly relate to their work in school, because that's one of their primary tasks at this age, is to function well in school. So when we take a look at self-concept, you'll recall from the early childhood years that most children had pretty high self-concept. That starts to shift a little bit now that we enter the middle childhood years. It's not that it plummets or that most people end up having a negative self-perception. It's just that it becomes a little bit more realistic during this time period. And one of the main reasons for this is egocentrism is declining. So if you remember that concept from Piaget, during the pre-operational period, children had a lot of cognitive flaws, and one of the flaws was egocentrism, the lack of ability to see the world through someone else's point of view. Well, when you can't see the world from someone else's point of view, that means you're not comparing yourself to anyone else. You can't even imagine what it looks like from that other person's perspective. But what happens here in the concrete operational period of middle childhood, what happens is that egocentrism declines. So now they can start to see the world from different person's points of view. So they can look at their teacher and say, I wonder what my teacher thinks of me as compared to Sally or Raj or whoever it might be sitting next to me. And I wonder what mom and dad think of me compared to my brothers or sisters. So as this peer comparison model begins, self-esteem can shift a little bit and may become more realistic, and in some cases it's going to decrease a bit because it was really artificially high during the early childhood years. It also becomes much more comprehensive in nature. So during this stage of development, the self-concept is based on 4 primary factors. The academic part of who you are, so how are you performing in school and how does that compare to others? The social part of who you are. So you might realize that, I may not be a superstar in my math class, but you know what? People really like me. I'm friendly. I'm outgoing. I'm invited to lots of birthday parties. I'm kind of a hit in the social world. In terms of physical and athletic abilities, you may or may not be a strong person in this area, and you're going to look at yourself in that capacity. So are you the first one always picked in gym class, or are you the last one, or someone in between? And then, as we said previously, the physical appearance still remains an important part of our self-concept. So I'd like to share with you a little bit of research on attribution theory, because it does play a role in how we perceive ourselves. And it's a really fascinating study by Mueller and Dweck. What they wanted to do is they wanted to investigate, does the type of praise impact effort and performance? So let's take a look at how their study was set up. They started off, I believe they used 5th grade students, upper elementary level students, and they had to complete puzzles that were of moderate difficulty level. So basically, it was in their zone of proximal development, if you want to use a little Vygotsky terminology. And generally, after completing this first puzzle, most folks were very successful. They then were provided feedback on their performance. It was good feedback, and I'll go over the different types in a minute. And this was an experimental study. So students in this particular study were randomly assigned to receive different types of feedback. So that's the part we'll go over in just another minute. After they received that feedback, everyone was given a difficult puzzle. So this was outside of their zone. It was designed to create a failure experience. So at this stage of the game, the folks are expected to not do well on the puzzle. This wasn't really the interesting piece of it. What the researchers wanted to know was, how did students do on this puzzle at the end, which was also a moderate difficulty puzzle, compared to the one in the beginning? So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Oops, hang on a second. Let me tell you about the different feedback groups. I forgot to do that. So one group was told, wow, you did really well, you must be really smart. And another group was told, wow, you did really well, you must have worked really hard. And the third group, which is called the control group, was told, wow, you did really well, period. Okay, so now that you know about the three different groups, let's go ahead and take a peek at the results. So the first thing we want to look at is in the beginning, everyone was kind of at the same place, which is what you would expect when you randomly assign folks to different groups. You expect the performance to be kind of at the similar place, and it was. So if we take a look at who performed the best, it's the red line, and the red line indicates the effort group. The effort group was the group of students who were told, wow, you must have done really well, you worked really hard. And if you think about what might have happened, let's just go back a minute. If you were told here you did well because you worked really hard, after you had your failure experience, the most likely interpretation that you're going to have is, wow, I must not have worked hard enough. So when it's time to do this last puzzle, you're going to really work much more, put a lot more effort in, and it does pay off. As we can see, the performance was the highest there. If we look at the second highest group, that was the control group. Now, the control group was simply told, wow, you did well, and it was really left up to their interpretation. So here we can see there really was not a big change. It was slight improvement, and that's probably because they were doing puzzles for a while, and you do get better by just practicing using the puzzles. But this right here is not like a refrigerator moment, nothing to be too excited about. Perhaps the most interesting finding is really this one here, the last one, which is the blue line, which refers to the ability group. Because not only did this group not perform better, it performed worse. And significantly much worse than the effort group, for sure. There's a very giant difference here. So as a reminder, this group was told, wow, you did really well, you must be really smart. And what many students think is that smartness or intelligence is not changeable. So after this difficult puzzle, this group probably said, wow, I guess I'm really not that smart. And you don't feel like you have that much control over that. And if that's the case, then you're going to really just kind of give up almost and not really work very hard at that. And the result, of course, is poor performance. So what this research study is all about is really attribution theory. What do you attribute your successes and your failures to? And students who attribute their successes and failures to something that's internal and changeable, such as effort, as we see right here with this line, are going to be more likely to be motivated and better performers. The other interesting thing about this research was that not only did that ability group not perform as well as the others, they also were more likely to want to give up, and they just didn't have that much motivation. They didn't enjoy the task as much as the others in the effort group. So there's a lot of negative consequences by having students either self-interpret or by us planting the seed that it might be due to something that's not changeable. So the key application here is that if we want to improve motivation, effort, performance, we have to help them understand their failures as something they have control over. So they have to be attributed to internal changeable factors. And that's really, really key. Very important really throughout the entire lifespan. But again, we're targeting middle childhood here as we're talking about these issues. So now let's go turn our attention to friendships. Remember in the early years, the friendship was really all about you and what you wanted. And if you wanted to play kickball, then you were going to be friends with me. If you didn't want to play kickball, then I'm dropping you and I'm going to find someone else who does want to play kickball with me. Well, now during the middle childhood years, it does shift a little bit, and it's based more on personal qualities, and we're a little more responsive. So a little bit more reciprocity is happening here. Whereas if you don't want to play kickball with me, but I really kind of like hanging out with you because you're a lot of fun or you're really nice, then I'm probably going to say, all right, what do you want to do today? Maybe we can play kickball tomorrow. So you're not as willing to kind of drop them just because they won't do what you want to do. You're more interested in their personal qualities, and you want to be somewhat responsive to their needs too, not just about your own needs. Now, in terms of peer status, we know this is a giant issue really throughout childhood and adolescence, and there's a lot of research really on this topic. So what some researchers have done is they've kind of gone into classrooms and they've said, make a list of students you like and make a list of students you don't like. Now, this is probably not really an ethical approach to doing it, but as you probably have discovered, psychology didn't always practice good ethics in the past, so there certainly are some research studies out there that may not be great, and we may not be replicating in today's world because we do care about ethics and things of that nature. But when they did this kind of study, what they discovered was you could have had really 4 possible outcomes. Either you ended up on the popular list, which meant that most people said, yes, we like you. Or you ended up on the rejected list, which is where most people said, we do not like you. Or it was kind of a mixed bag. That would be the controversial list. So, maybe half the kids liked you and half the kids didn't. Or you could have even been forgotten to even be included on the list and your name just wasn't there. And that would be the neglected group. Well, the interesting thing is that, as you're listening to this, you might say, I'm a little worried about the rejected and the neglected group. But the truth is the neglected group doesn't seem to have too much of a negative impact. It doesn't seem to have, a very strong negative impact on the students. And it may be partially because they may be more of the introverted folks who prefer to be kind of maybe the wallflower or kind of in the background rather than center stage. And so they're kind of comfortable in that role. It's not like they're necessarily looking for something that they're not getting. The group that we do need to be concerned about, however, is the rejected group. And that is because this group is at the highest risk for problems later on in life. So we certainly need to make sure we have tons of interventions. Clearly, they can be victims of bullying and other things of that nature. And there's a lot of negative impacts of that. And we'll be talking about that one of our message board conversations. We'll talk about bullying. But the idea here is that we need to kind of find out who these kids are, and this happens pretty early on, and provide them, with some interventions and supports. Now, if we take a peek at what's happening in the family life of the child, sibling rivalry increases. Again, this happens because the egocentrism has declined. So because they can see, again, other people's point of view, and they're looking at it from mom and dad's or grandma and grandpa's or whatever the caretaker's role might be, they are kind of competing for attention, and they want to be kind of one up on their brother or sister. So that certainly can play a role in what's happening in family life, whereas in the early childhood years, they weren't really so even attuned to that topic or issue. The other issue that your author talks about is divorce, and we'll be talking about divorce later on when we get to the adulthood years and its impact on the parental figures, the husband and wife. But here in this chapter, we're looking at the focus on the child and what kind of consequences are happening. So clearly there are significant ways that this may play a role in that child's life. It can impact them from an academic standpoint in terms of grades and things of that nature. Certainly an emotional standpoint in terms of self-esteem and just general depression or anxiety and things of that nature. The social impact, they may get, more isolated, may not want to spend time with their friends. They might be embarrassed by what's happening. They might feel responsible for what's happening, and that really can be fairly traumatic on the child. However, most of the research kind of supports the issue that the impact tends to be somewhat short-lived. I mean, it's not that it doesn't impact you for life, but the more intense impact really is a little bit shorter. And within a couple of years or so, most of the children are getting back on track in school and with their social arenas, etc. So although the impact certainly can be long-lasting, and obviously there's many variables at play, depends on how the divorce happens, how much contact they have with both parents, what the level of tension and etc. are in that area, and what it was like before the divorce. I mean, in many situations, it was a pretty tense or stressful environmental situation before the divorce, so this may be a welcomed breath of fresh air to have less tension on a daily basis. So lots of different variables at play, but I did want to mention the impact of divorce on the children. So in this chapter, you'll also see lots of other issues such as, blended families and only children and issues, such as sexual abuse and other things like that. I certainly want you to go ahead and read the entire chapter, and hopefully you'll get a better understanding of what kinds of issues are facing the child in that 6 to 12 age range.